We talked about the motivation, the importance of the information. Time and resources is a tremendous factor in how people evaluate truth and credibility or truth and factual information online, right? And whether it's very simple to share. I mean, research has found that, you know, when people retweet and send tweets, they don't necessarily click on the link to read what it is, they just share it. And this is a perfect example. So I on this side, I write, some of you, Visible Technologies, I'm an analyst with him as well, I do it most of their time. And one of the things that I find is when we go through and talk about people retweeting topics, I'll click on the link and they'll have like 50 or 100 retweets. The link's broken, it doesn't even work. And you would be shocked at how many times people share broken links, which means they're not even looking at the information themselves, right? So it's sort of that people also have motivations to just share information because they want to be helpful or they want to be seen sort of as authorities on the topic. I admit I do that all the time. I just share information without necessarily clicking on the link. God, I wonder if my link's in. Should check. And then also, so time and resources, evaluating that sort of thing. And then also the content domain of the information also plays a role into how much time you're going to devote, right? And how personal it is to you as well, whether you're going to identify it as truth factual. Okay, I'm going to skip this slide. See, it's really interesting, but I don't want this to be too, I don't want anyone falling asleep. Okay, so here's what we've seen and here's what we decide. Here's basically how people identify information. One, can it be verified elsewhere, right? Do you have sort of third-party credibility? Do you have that third-party endorsement? What are the qualifications of the source itself? So when people decide if something's truthful or factual, who is it coming from, right? And you even assess this with your friends. If you look on Facebook, if somebody shares a link, I assess the information based on that person's past experiences I have with them and their previous articles. Because I'm friends with some crazy people on Facebook, right? And you may be too. Like the really crazy, you're like, okay, I know this could be some crazy weird article, so I'm not even gonna. So that sort of affects it as well, is who's the source and who's it coming from. The objectivity, so is the author biased? And this doesn't mean, of course, that if the author is biased, that you're going to discount them, but it plays a role in how well you can assess the bias of the author. Because if you like Bill O'Reilly or you like Rachel Maddow, I mean, that's sort of your values that you sort of espouse, and there are clearly two biased sources, but you sort of are aware of that, or maybe not aware of that. I don't think some people are aware of that. Also, the up-to-date, how up-to-date is the information plays a role when people assess it as well. And you know, even with our social media science research center, if you see research from 08, 09, as far as like what's out there in social media, it's pretty much outdated, right? I mean, things are happening, and that's why with our, I don't want to over-promote because Don's going to talk about it, but our top 10 research articles of 2013, I mean, this is stuff came out first of the year, because you have to keep that stuff relevant and updated, because it does change depending on whatever the field is. I mean, but Tim's research, I mean, he's been doing it for a long time, and that stuff's continuously relevant over a long period of time. Also, how comprehensive is the information? And the more comprehensive the information, the better. And giving information. But then there's also research out there, especially in times of crisis, that if you give too much information, it confuses people and they don't know what to do. So it seems like we always have the yin and the yang with research. Like, don't do this, but they sort of contradict each other. All right, and of course, everything involves sort of that perceived credibility. To finish this part before I quickly talk about my mobile research, here's what Stanford, they gave 10 guidelines, but I thought 4 weren't very relevant. So I chose these 6, which I thought were really good. 1, make it easy to verify accuracy. Include sources, include links to other sites so people can verify information. Those independent third-party sources, as you know, are very important. The real organization behind the site, and I think this really applies to social media, is that human voice perspective. There's been a lot of research in academia about human voice. And what I mean by that is when you're online or when an organization is tweeting or Facebooking, that it sounds like there's an actual person and not a robot who's putting information out, because it really turns people off. A good example of this, in July, Bank of America, they were sort of called out for the Bank of America bot. on Twitter. What happened, and I've dealt with Bank of America on Twitter. They're actually really, really good on Twitter. But what they were doing is they were sort of sending canned tweets. So if I said, I love Bank of America, they would reply and say, I'm sorry you're experiencing that problem. How can I help you, right? So what happened, Bank of America replied to LA Occupy and said, we're sorry you're experiencing that problem. How can we help you? And LA Occupy is like, what? Like, why are you responding to us? We just called you out and said, I think it was about the quarterly profits for that quarter. And then Bank of America replied, we're sorry, how can we help you? And then what happened was, then they tweeted it out. And then when you look at sort of the comments after that, people were saying, is this the canned response or the real Bank of America? And I've seen with clients and comments on Facebook and tweets as well, that they say, please don't give me that canned response that you give to everybody else. Like, give me the real response. That human voice is very important, that it sounds like it's an actual person that you're talking to and not an individual. And now with social media, people expect that. And my research has found that as well. I do a lot of research in the human voice, and it increases credibility. And people like it because they feel like they're talking to a person instead of the robot. Okay, and then highlight expertise, and I think we've covered that as well. The make contact info accessible, this is Fogg's research, which I was surprised, found that if you put the physical address, like the physical address of the corporate office online, it increases credibility, right? So go and put the physical address of your corporate office there. But that's what he found as well. But that also I think a lot of times decreases frustration for users, which I'm going to talk about in the next part. And then site easy to use and useful, which I'm going to talk about when I get to mobile, because I think that's really important. And then knock off some of the overly promotional content. So we did a study looking at YouTube, and some organizations just put their ads on there. So that's just a very sort of self-serving thing. It needs to be sort of a balance.